The resurrection of Christ is the most profound and transformative moment in all of Christian history, yet it remains a mystery the world has never fully witnessed. Most people think they know the story. A stone rolled away, sunlight spilling into the tomb, a figure in white linen emerging. But Mel Gibson insists that this image barely scratches the surface. The true resurrection was not calm, serene, or poetic. It was terrifying, supernatural, and world-shaking. Something extraordinary occurred within that tomb, something so profound, so unimaginable, that generations of films, paintings, and sermons have recoiled from portraying it. The forces at work were beyond human comprehension, responding in ways that defy imagination. They revealed the full cost of Christ's victory, the uncontainable power of his divine authority, and the force that shattered death itself. What truly happened the instant Jesus rose? And why has this reality been hidden from human eyes for centuries? Gibson's vision seeks to reveal a resurrection unlike anything the world has ever seen. A resurrection that challenges, confronts, and transforms everything it touches. Everyone thinks they know the story. The stone rolls away. Light pierces the darkness. A man in white linen emerges, music swells, the camera pulls back, the story appears complete. That version has been repeated countless times. Clean, safe, easy to understand. Yet that version does not haunt Mel Gibson. It is not the story that shakes him to his very core when he imagines putting it on film. The true mystery lies not in what happens after the tomb opens, but in the moments before anyone arrives. Before Mary approaches the garden, before the guards flee in terror, before the disciples hear the news and struggle to believe. There exists a stretch of time between the crucifixion and the empty tomb that cinema has barely touched, a period dark, unknowable, charged with a power that is almost unbearable. Most filmmakers skip it entirely. Gibson understands why. It is theological terrain, raw and uncontainable, a place studios fear to tread. It does not fit neatly into 3 acts, but that is precisely where the real earthquake occurred. Not the one that split rocks at Christ's death, but the one that shattered every assumption about death, life, and what lies beyond the mortal world. Gibson has spent years studying this gap, poring over ancient texts, prophecies, and creeds that mention it only in passing, as if everyone already understood its significance. He has consulted scholars who treat it as a footnote, and priests who know it changes everything, yet struggle to explain how. Most people imagine the resurrection as a simple return of a body to life. That is only part of the story. What happened in that tomb was not merely a reversal of death. It was an unstoppable invasion, a door kicked open from the inside, a violent upheaval of everything death had ever claimed. Death, which had long ruled as the final authority over humanity, was no longer absolute. That is the version Gibson seeks to capture, not the safe, sanitized, comforting version audiences expect, but the raw, unflinching, and terrifying truth. This was the event that unfolded between Friday afternoon and Sunday morning, a victory that appeared violent, unstoppable, and overwhelmingly powerful. To truly understand it, one must begin at the moment Christ breathed his last breath. In that instant, the world's understanding of death began to fracture irreparably. The sky darkened, the ground shook. Even the hardened Roman soldiers, accustomed to brutality and death, felt something unfamiliar, a shiver down their spines, a sense that the very fabric of existence had shifted. The temple veil, the sacred barrier separating humanity from God, tore from top to bottom, as if the heavens themselves could no longer contain the divine presence. Access to God, once restricted and terrifying, was suddenly open to all. Attempts to repair the veil failed. Once the door to God's presence is opened, nothing can close it again. Death had claimed Christ, and yet he had already begun to reclaim the realm. The disciples cowered in fear. The women wept inconsolably. The religious leaders exhaled in relief, certain the movement had ended. Rome believed it had quelled the unrest. But the true battle was only beginning. This was not a story of victimhood. It was the dawn of a conquest no human could have anticipated. Christ was about to enter a domain no living person had ever returned from, a place where the power of death itself would be challenged and overturned. The tomb was sealed, Roman guards stationed, the stone secured with cords and wax stamped with imperial authority. Everyone assumed the threat would come from outside, but the true danger had already begun from within. Death itself could not contain what had entered it. Christ's spirit had already departed the tomb, venturing into the realm of the dead, a place locked and forgot. 10 since the first breath of Adam. Gibson sees this descent as the centerpiece of the resurrection story. It was not a rescue mission, it was a takeover. For millennia, death had been absolute. It had believed itself invincible. It had no idea it had consumed something that would destroy it from the inside out. Gibson imagines a violent, radiant light piercing the darkness, not comforting, not gentle, but fierce, unstoppable, and liberating. This light shattered chains, flung open gates, and forced darkness to retreat. This was not merely about freeing a few righteous souls. It was about overturning death's grip on all humanity, a power death would not relinquish willingly. The righteous recognized him instantly, the deliverer promised, the presence foretold. Moses, Abraham, David, they all knew. God's word had arrived in person, in power, exactly as promised. This was the moment the true victory was won, not the crucifixion, which was necessary preparation, but this unseen, supernatural confrontation where the prison doors were kicked open and history itself reversed course. Death ceased being the final word. It became a doorway, a transition, something Christ had already traversed and returned from. The grave emptied systematically, deliberately, as a conqueror releases prisoners in a defeated city. But the triumph of the Spirit required the world above to witness it. The body in the tomb had to reflect what had already been accomplished. Between the realm of the dead and the sealed tomb in Jerusalem, spirit and flesh reunited, not in the way of birth, but as life forcing its way back into a body that had been tortured, killed, and left for dead. Blood had stopped flowing. Cells had ceased dividing. Biological processes that define life had completely ceased, and then they began again. Wounds remained as proof, nail marks in his hands and feet, the spear wound in his side. They were not erased, but preserved, evidence that this was the same man who had suffered. The stone did not move to let him out. It moved to show the world they were already too late. The tomb was empty, revealing a victory that no army, no empire, no authority could contain. Christ's first appearance was to Mary Magdalene, grief-stricken and alone, expecting only a corpse. She assumed the body had been stolen until she heard her name. And then she saw him, standing alive, breathing, whole. He revealed himself to the disciples next, teaching, sharing meals, showing the wounds in his hands and side, walking with them, appearing in locked rooms, appearing at dawn on beaches. Thomas required proof and Christ provided it. Doubt vanished. Finally, on a hillside outside Jerusalem, he ascended, not in death, but in transition. 10 days later, the Spirit he promised arrived, igniting the resurrection into streets, cities, and nations, a chain reaction still unfolding to this day. The resurrection is not merely a scene, it is the scene. Everything in human history either leads to it or flows from it. Cinema has barely touched its depths. Gibson knows he cannot capture all of it, but he can push boundaries, stretch imagination, and make audiences feel the immense weight of what happened in that tomb. This is the resurrection the world has never truly seen, not sanitized, not safe, but transformative, still spreading, still unfinished, still alive. As the body of Christ was taken down from the cross, the air itself seemed heavy with grief and awe. Joseph of Arimathea stepped forward, a wealthy man, a member of the very council that had condemned Jesus only hours before. Boldly he approached Pilate and requested the body, an act that could have been dangerous for him politically and socially. Pilate, surprised that Christ had died so swiftly, crucifixion typically took days, summoned the centurion to confirm the death. Once assured, he released the body. Nicodemus arrived as well, another council member who had remained silent during the trial, fearful of reprisal. He brought with him an extraordinary amount of myrrh and aloes, 75 pounds, enough for a burial fit for a king. They were not burying a failed Messiah. They were laying to rest someone they believed mattered, someone who had touched eternity itself. The tomb itself was new, hewn from solid rock, never before used. It was Joseph's own family tomb, yet even its familiarity did not lessen the weight of the moment. The men carried the body inside with reverent care, laying it on a stone bench. There was no ceremony, no time for elaborate mourning. Every motion was deliberate, essential. Wrap the body, position it, step back. Then came the stone, enormous and circular, rolled into place. It fit into its groove like a puzzle meant to last forever. Moving it required the effort of many men, and once set, it would take equal strength to roll it away again. Tombs were never simply resting places. They were seals, final barriers between the dead and the living. Even that, however, was not sufficient or the religious authorities. They remembered the words Jesus had spoken. He would rise on the third day. They did not believe it would happen, yet they could not risk the disciples claiming otherwise. So they went to Pilate with a request. Secure the tomb, post guards, seal it officially. Pilate granted their petition. Roman soldiers were stationed, trained men who knew the penalty for failure was death. The stone was not only rolled into place, it was sealed with imperial authority. A cord stretched across it, wax stamped with the official seal. To break it was to defy Rome itself. Everyone assumed that the threat would come from outside, from thieves or followers desperate to make a claim. Nobody imagined that the real power that would breach the tomb had already been unleashed from within. While guards watched the entrance with vigilance and priests felt a temporary sense of security, Christ's spirit had already departed the tomb. It was moving into a realm that no living human had ever returned from, a place long sealed, long feared, the abode of the dead. Gibson calls it the descent, a moment Hollywood has never dared to depict. It is not hell as cartoons imagine it, with flames and pitchforks. It is the place where human souls awaited judgment and release, the waiting room of death itself, locked since Adam's first breath. But this was not a rescue mission, it was a takeover. For thousands of years, death had been absolute, the final authority over every living being. It had swallowed countless men and women, kings and beggars, prophets and fools. And yet death had no idea it had consumed something that would destroy it from within. Gibson envisions this moment with vivid clarity, a violent, brilliant light cutting through darkness, chains breaking, gates flying open, the shadows of the grave retreating in defeat. This was not gentle or comforting, it was forceful, absolute, a cosmic announcement. Every soul trapped in the darkness recognized him immediately. The righteous had been promised a redeemer, and now they saw him in person, in power. Moses knew, Abraham knew, David knew. The promises that had been whispered for millennia had arrived, tangible and unstoppable. In that moment, the rules of death, once immutable, were rewritten. The grave did not simply open, it emptied. Methodically, deliberately, like a conqueror releasing every prisoner in a city that had long been subdued. But even the triumph in the realm of the dead required proof in the world above. Spirit and flesh needed reunion. Somewhere between the shadowed domain of the departed and the sealed tomb in Jerusalem, life forced its way back into a body that had been broken, tortured, and killed. The body had lain still for parts of 3 days. Blood had ceased to flow. Cells had stopped dividing. Biological processes had shut down completely. And then life began again. The wounds remained, not erased, not disguised, but healed in a way that preserved memory. The nail marks in his hands and feet, the spear wound in his side, proof that this was the same man, the same suffering, the same living body returned from death itself. The stone did not move to allow him to escape. Nothing about the resurrection suggests limitation. The stone moved as a signal, too late. The tomb was empty, a declaration that what had been thought final was no longer so. The first person to witness this triumph was not a disciple, nor a priest, nor a crowd. It was Mary Magdalene, grief-stricken and alone, coming at dawn expecting only to anoint a corpse. She found the stone already rolled away, the tomb empty, the burial cloths left behind like shed skin. She did not think resurrection, she thought theft. And then he called her by name, Mary, and she recognized him instantly, the voice that mattered, the one that could not be mistaken. She turned and saw him fully alive, whole, standing before her. This was the resurrection the world had never truly seen. Not sanitized, not safe, but wild, unstoppable, and transformative. It began quietly in grief and solitude before spreading to the disciples, to the locked rooms, to the roads and beaches, to the 40 days of proof and teaching, until the moment of ascension. And finally, the arrival of the Spirit that ignited the chain reaction still unfolding today. It is a resurrection that continues, still powerful, still uncontainable, still rewriting the rules of life, death, and human history. As Christ's Spirit entered the realm of the dead, the rules that had governed humanity for thousands of years were shattered in an instant. This was a place of silence, shadow, and waiting, a vast, infinite expanse where every soul who had ever breathed, dreamed, or suffered since the dawn of time lingered in anticipation or despair. It was not a fiery hell or a place of torment in the ways popular imagination depicts. It was the hidden domain of death itself, the final boundary that no living person had ever crossed and returned. Yet Christ did not approach it timidly. He did not step cautiously or plead for permission. He came as a conqueror, moving with authority that commanded attention even in the darkness, radiating a power that was absolute, undeniable, and unstoppable. For the first time in history, death encountered resistance from the one it thought it had claimed. Death had rules, unyielding, merciless rules. Every human who entered its domain stayed. There were no exceptions, no appeals, no return. Kings and beggars, saints and sinners, prophets and fools, everyone succumbed to its dominion. And now death faced someone it could not contain, someone it had swallowed on the cross but could not digest. Someone who belonged in that place by human experience, but not by guilt, not by obligation, and not by its authority. The righteous, the faithful, the long dead who had clung to God's promises recognized him immediately. Moses, Abraham, David, the countless who had trusted in a coming deliverer, they understood the fulfillment of the promise in a single, electrifying presence. The one they had long awaited had arrived. He was no longer a distant hope or a whispered prophecy. He was flesh and spirit reunited, radiating divine authority. Gibson envisions it as the most crucial confrontation in human history. The crucifixion, while necessary, was only preparation. The real victory, the moment that rewrote existence, occurred here in the hidden shadows of the realm of the dead. In that moment, the prison doors of eternity were flung open. Chains that had bound humanity for generations shattered. The law of death, the finality it had imposed for millennia, was broken from the inside out. Light pierced the darkness, not soft, gentle light, but violent, unstoppable brilliance that made shadows retreat and sent tremors through every corner of the realm. The power of life, unbound and unstoppable, surged through the darkness, touching every soul trapped there. The deliverance was methodical, deliberate, and complete. Every righteous soul was released, every promise fulfilled, every ancient expectation realized. The finality of death had been undone. But this triumph was not yet visible in the world above. While the spirit conquered the unseen domain, the body lay in the sealed tomb. Spirit and flesh were separate for a time, but the resurrection demanded reunion. Somewhere between the shadowed domain of the departed and the tomb in Jerusalem, life forced its way back into the body. The wounds remained, scars from the nails and the spear, proof that this was the same man who had suffered and died. Blood that had stopped flowing began again, cells reactivated, the processes of life restarted, not by magic or illusion, but by the unstoppable force of divine authority. The body that had been dead for parts of 3 days, according to Jewish counting, now lived again. This was not a replacement, not a phantom, not a vision. It was the same Jesus, restored, transformed, and victorious over death itself. The stone at the tomb did not roll away to let him escape. The resurrection was never about limitation. The stone rolled back as a declaration, too late. The tomb was empty and the miracle had already occurred. The first witness would not be a crowd, a priest, or a soldier. It would be Mary Magdalene, grief-stricken and alone, coming to the tomb before dawn to mourn, expecting only a corpse. She found instead the stone moved, the tomb empty, and the burial cloths left behind as if shed like skin. She did not immediately grasp resurrection. She feared theft. And then he spoke, her name, Mary. In an instant, recognition struck her like lightning. She saw him fully alive, whole, not as a stranger, not as a gardener, but as the teacher, the rabbi, the man she had followed, watched, die, and loved. The resurrection in all its raw, uncontainable power had begun quietly. It spread first to the heart of grief, to the eyes of those willing to seek him, before ever confronting the crowds, the authorities, or the world. It was not about spectacle. It was about reality bending in ways the world had never seen. From Mary to the disciples, from the hidden rooms to roads and beaches, from touch to sight to shared meals, Christ's resurrection revealed itself gradually, deliberately, ensuring that every witness could comprehend, even in part, the magnitude of what had transpired. It was life breaking free from death, the impossible made real, and the rules of existence forever rewritten. Gibson's vision of the resurrection is not of quiet serenity, but of unstoppable, violent light piercing the deepest darkness. This light is not comforting or gentle. It is raw, overwhelming, and unrelenting. It shatters chains, throws open gates, and forces shadows to retreat. It is a power that refuses to negotiate, a force that asserts life over death, authority over silence, victory over finality. And it is not a selective act of salvation. It is universal, every rule deep. H had enforced for millennia, every assumption humanity had clung to about the finality of life was confronted and upended. When Christ entered the realm of the dead, he did so with authority. Death had swallowed him, claiming him as it had every other human being, yet it could not hold him. He moved through that shadowed domain untouched by the power that had bound all others. The righteous recognized him instantly. Moses, Abraham, David, the long-dead prophets, the faithful who had hoped and waited, every promise spoken by God's word found fulfillment in his presence. They saw at last the deliverer they had trusted in from the depths of time. He was not distant. He was not abstract. He was present, living, and victorious, radiating power beyond comprehension. This, Gibson argues, is the true hinge of human history, not the crucifixion, which prepared the world for what was to come, but this unseen confrontation. Here in the realm of the dead, the ransom was paid. The prison doors were kicked open. The authority of death itself was broken. History shifted in that moment. Death, once absolute, became a doorway, a threshold into a new order of existence. The grave emptied with deliberate precision, systematically, like a conqueror releasing prisoners in a conquered city. But this triumph could not remain hidden in the shadows. The world above needed proof. The empty tomb, the body, the visible evidence, all had to confirm the magnitude of the spiritual victory that had just occurred. Between the conquered realm of death and the sealed tomb in Jerusalem, spirit and flesh reunited, not as at birth, but as life forced its way back into a body that had been broken, tortured, and left for dead. 3 days had passed. Blood had stopped flowing. Cells had ceased dividing. Biological processes had halted. And then, with unstoppable authority, life returned. The wounds remained, the nail marks in his hands and feet, the spear wound in his side, preserved not as blemishes to be erased, but as undeniable proof that this was the same man who had suffered. The stone did not move for him. He needed nothing. It moved for the world, a declaration: you are too late. The tomb was empty. Death had been defeated, precisely where Rome and the religious leaders had believed it had triumphed forever. The first witness was Mary Magdalene, alone, grief-stricken, expecting only the cold weight of a corpse. She assumed the body had been stolen, that hope had failed. Then a voice called her name, intimate, personal, unshakable. Mary, she turned. And there he was, alive, whole, breathing. Recognition struck her like lightning. This was no gardener, no stranger, no phantom. This was the man she had followed, watched, die, and loved. Alive, victorious, eternal. The resurrection unfolded quietly, deliberately. Christ appeared to his disciples, teaching them, sharing meals, walking roads with them, allowing them to touch the wounds in his hands and side. He appeared in locked rooms, on beaches at dawn, in ways both ordinary and miraculous. Thomas demanded proof, and Christ gave it, dispelling doubt, confirming faith, revealing the reality of life over death. Finally, outside Jerusalem, on a hillside, he ascended, not in death, but in transition, leaving the physical realm behind. 10 days later, the spirit he had promised arrived, igniting the world with power. Fear became courage, hiding became proclamation. The resurrection spread from that hidden tomb into streets, cities, nations, a chain reaction of life and hope still unfolding, still transforming humanity. The resurrection is not just a scene. It is the scene, the event from which all history flows. It is the axis on which time, faith, and eternity pivot. Cinema has barely touched its depths. Gibson knows the challenge is impossible, to capture a reality that transcends human vision. But he can push imagination to its limits, allow audiences to feel the weight, the terror, the awe of that tomb. This is the resurrection the world has never truly seen, not sanitized, not safe, not comfortable. It is raw, transformative, unstoppable, still spreading, still unfinished, still alive.